They always tell you, if she goes silent, it means she doesn't care anymore. But that's not always true. Sometimes silence isn't indifference, it's measurement. She doesn't need to argue with you. She doesn't need to explain anything. She doesn't need to raise her voice or create drama. She just needs to stay quiet and watch what you do. Because silence reveals something very simple: your stability. The moment she creates distance, your mind starts racing. You start overthinking. You start imagining scenarios that haven't even happened. You start asking yourself what you did wrong even when there's no evidence you did anything. And without realizing it, you're already reacting. Not because you're weak, not because you lack character, but because you're uncomfortable not being in control. You're uncomfortable not knowing. You're uncomfortable not getting an immediate response. You're uncomfortable not being able to close the loop. And the man who cannot tolerate uncertainty becomes predictable. And a predictable man is easy to read. When you react quickly, you give information. Without saying it directly, you're telling her, your silence moves me. Your distance unsettles me. Your absence destabilizes me. I need you to confirm that everything is okay. And the moment you give that information, the dynamic shifts. Not because she's manipulative, but because now she knows exactly where you stand. She knows how much it affects you. She knows how much you depend. She knows how hard it is for you to wait. And this is where most men stumble. They start texting. They start explaining. They start justifying things nobody asked them to justify. They demand immediate clarity. And in that attempt to fix things, they end up confessing their insecurities. They fall into what we could call a guilt-driven confession. You start saying, if I did something, tell me. If you're upset, we can fix it. If you need space, I understand. But no one asked you for that. No one accused you. No one blamed you. You assumed. And that assumption comes from the fear of losing control. But that isn't leadership. That's anxiety disguised as maturity. And anxiety always exposes more than you think. Now listen carefully. This isn't about becoming cold. It's not about ignoring her as punishment. It's not about proving that you can play the game too. It's about not losing your center. Because when you lose your center, you lose your position. If she goes silent, you don't chase. You observe. You don't fill the void with unnecessary words. You don't fill the space with forced explanations. You don't try to fix something that doesn't even exist yet. You simply observe the pattern, asking, is this common? Is this repetitive behavior? Or is this something new? You think before you act, and if you decide to speak, you do it from stability. I've noticed some distance. I want to understand what's going on. No accusatory tone, no drama, no urgency in your voice. Here's the real difference. You speak to understand, not to calm your anxiety. And if she doesn't respond immediately, you don't collapse, not because you don't care, but because your stability doesn't depend on her response. That's what changes everything. When you stop reacting the way you used to, she feels it. Not because you're punishing her, but because you're no longer easy to move. Human beings need predictability to feel in control. If you used to respond in seconds and now you respond with pause, she notices. If you used to seek reassurance and now you maintain composure, she notices. If you used to need immediate clarity and now you can wait, she notices. And that's when the dynamic shifts, not through manipulation, through structure. Because when a man proves he can tolerate uncertainty without falling apart, he projects security. And security isn't loud. It's felt. The problem was never her silence. It was your urgency. And when you reduce urgency, you regain internal control. And when you regain internal control, everything else falls into place. And this is where many get confused. They think silence is war. It isn't. It's a mirror. Because when she goes quiet, what really activates isn't conflict, it's your mind. You hear yourself getting impatient. You catch yourself imagining scenarios that haven't even happened. You start building entire stories without having any real evidence. And in that process, you begin exposing yourself. Not necessarily outwardly. First, inwardly. You realize how much control you need. You realize how uncomfortable it is not to know. You realize how much you depend on confirmation. And that's uncomfortable. Because that's when you discover it isn't her destabilizing you. It's your fear of losing. When silence appears, it doesn't reveal what she feels. It reveals what you fear. You fear not being enough. You fear there's someone else. You fear her interest is fading. You fear you're investing where you shouldn't. And those fears push you to act, not from clarity, from anxiety. And when anxiety leads, your language changes, your tone changes, your energy changes. And even if you think you're being mature, what you often project is urgency. And urgency always lowers perceived value, not because you're worth less, but because it signals dependence. A woman doesn't test a man when everything is comfortable. She tests him in friction, in distance, in tension, because that's when it becomes clear whether a man has internal structure or depends on external stimuli to feel grounded. The man who depends on stimuli is easy to move. Today he smiles if she texts. Tomorrow he shuts down if she doesn't. The next day he's trying to fix something that was never a real crisis. That gets exhausting. Not out of cruelty, out of energy. Stability feels safe. Instability feels heavy. And silence forces you to choose what kind of man you're going to be. So, what do you do when silence appears? You don't feed it. You don't chase it. You don't turn it into drama. You hold it. Because the man who can hold the void without panicking is the man with real power. And holding doesn't mean ignoring. It means not overflowing. It means not running after answers just to calm a temporary emotion. It means understanding that your value doesn't rise or fall based on how fast someone replies. When you stop reacting, something shifts. Not outside, inside. Your nervous system regulates. Your mind organizes itself, your posture stabilizes, and that's noticeable. Because now you're not acting on impulse, you're choosing. And the man who chooses is different from the man who reacts. She might speak again, she might not. But you're no longer waiting. You're no longer checking your phone like it's an emotional thermometer. You're busy, not pretending to be busy, actually busy. Building discipline, moving toward your goals, putting your life in order. Because here's a truth most won't admit. If your world freezes because someone goes silent, then your world was too small. That's not an attack. It's an adjustment. Silence isn't taking something from you. It's showing you something. It's revealing where you still depend. And when you strengthen that weak point, the dynamic shifts. Not because she loses power, but because you regain yours. And this is the most important part. This isn't about her coming back. It's about you not going back to the version of yourself that reacted from scarcity. A solid man doesn't need to prove anything. He doesn't need to chase. He doesn't need to beg. He doesn't need immediate resolution. He can wait. He can observe. He can decide. And when you decide from calm, you gain clarity. And with clarity, you don't take the bait. Not because you don't have emotions, but because you're no longer ruled by them. That's the final point. Silence was never the enemy. Your unregulated reaction was. And the day you learn to control your reaction, that's the day you stop being manipulable. That's the day you stop being predictable. That's the day you stop losing yourself. And that's the day you start leading.